Welcome to the Outside Our Walls podcast. We are here jumping in today, just again, as we do, jump in to talk about some different thoughts, perspectives, get some wisdom from people that are outside our walls at Anchor Church. And so today I have some friends with me. I have Kate and Neil DeGraide, and I'll start with Kate's name. I'll throw Kate's name out there first. Kate and Neil. Known you guys probably for 5 years. I think I met you guys around 2015 or ish. I don't know. Working on a songwriting album together. You're muted though, so you got to unmute there.
You don't
there
like
we
that?
go. Hey, I mean, you're welcome to talk that way, but I can't hear you.
I was like, this guy's asking me stuff and I'm talking and he's not stopping.
I wasn't
He's awesome.
stopping because couldn't hear.
Committed to what he's saying.
I will be committed to this. It's good to have you guys. Thanks for jumping on with us.
Thanks for having me.
I met you early January, I think 2015. That was it.
So.
That's when we met him. Yeah. In Kentucky.
In Louisville, Kentucky. The first time I saw your home, which I took pictures of your Disneyland pictures of the Haunted Mansion.
Oh, from the Haunted Mansion.
Yep.
Yeah,
My
the
favorite
long.
in the house.
Yeah, from the Haunted House.
Yeah.
What was funny was that I went.
Ride.
It's such a great ride. The next time I went there, it was like transported back to your house because I'm like, oh, the pictures are stretching. This isn't a DeGraide.
Kate and Neil ride now.
Exactly.
Great.
Tell us a little bit about yourselves. I know you guys live in Louisville. How many kids do you have? What are you guys doing these days? Give us some perspective.
We've been married 20 years.
Yes.
Going on 21.
Yep. We met because I was living in Providence, Rhode Island, and Kate was living in Los Angeles, and she auditioned for a musical that was opening on the East Coast out there, and she received the lead part. And
Received it.
Long story short of my end is that I had no interest in being in a musical, but was hitching a ride off of one of my friends who was going to audition and who made me audition with him, not at the same exact time, but and I got the male lead.
Woohoo.
And the casting director said that he picked me because he thought we went so well together. And his quote was, "You're going to want to marry this girl." So that's how we were divinely brought together from one coast to another.
And they were wrong at first because we kind of butted heads.
Oh yeah, he was so snobby.
Yeah, and I thought he was kind of cocky.
I was so cocky.
But yeah, so that was like almost 23 years ago, I guess. And we have 4 children, ranging 6 to 15.
Yeah,
15 is scary. Yeah, going on 16. Yep, that's a scary one. But
they're all singers, as you can imagine from our
they're very
our
creative.
Meeting in a musical.
Yeah. We're probably not the most cookie cutter parents that ever lived, but it's a fun bunch over here.
My mom has tarantula legs for hair.
It's true. I do love the dreads. I do love the dreads. What's fun? I think we talked about this maybe when we met, but I think our kids are relatively the same age. I have my oldest is almost going to be 15. My youngest is he's 8, but we have 3 girls and a boy, and I think that's similar to you guys, right?
Your boy's the youngest too?
Yeah.
See, this doesn't work because if you could flip that, we could do like your church does arranged marriages. So
absolutely, yeah, we could totally make that.
We can get this all done in one shot.
It'd be great. Exactly. What's the dowry? That's what we got to figure out. We got to figure out all these kinds of things.
Yeah, we have the most of the girls. That's the problem. Yeah, we're going to be shelling out some cash.
It's true.
It's a problem.
It is a problem overall. You guys are some of the most creative people I know in a good way. Just from the standpoint of thinking through. It is very good. You know, sometimes
what would be the bad way?
Well, sometimes you can get creative people that that think that they're creative, you know, that they're like, oh, we're going to be creative. But then it comes across as just, you're trying too hard, you know, like
got it. Yeah.
And I grew up playing in bands, and I grew up around, so you get both, but you guys just are legitimately, and I know that a lot of that is through a lot of hard work, a lot of practicing musicianship. Still, I think Neil, your solo on Leviathan, that musical breakdown, such a great just
I do like that
musicianship.
a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I think
overall,
that's something
just,
people overlook a lot of times is they think creativity is just this spontaneous kind of organic thing that just
yes.
happens. And I mean, this guy specifically is like one of the hardest workers I know over the last 23 years of just getting up and doing the work. And that doesn't always go together with creativity, you know? So.
Agreed.
Yeah, well, I mean, creativity a lot of times accompanies insecurity because it doesn't matter how creative you are, you always have more bad ideas than you have good ideas.
Yep.
And so the vulnerability of having to put bad ideas out sometimes and deal with the consequences of that will stop. People won't know why they're having trouble finishing or doing their work or creatively, but there's this. You don't want to be attached to it at the end and committed to it unless you know it's great. And for some people, that just stalls them out and kind of destroys their work ethic. It's not that they don't want to create things. It's not that they even don't have a good work ethic. It's just that they're so afraid of the consequences of it not going well that they get hung up.
It hurts.
It does hurt. And actually, that's a really good, because I think that sometimes people do things creative with this artwork. Kate, you did a lot of the artwork for you guys, right? You're just drawing and
I've done
painting.
some, but yeah, in the last couple years, I've been doing a lot more sketching and art kind of stuff. Yeah,
which is beautiful and it's great.
Right now.
Yeah,
nice. Well, it's beautiful. It's great. I think that is same thing with creativity. It's artwork, it's singing, it's music, it's writing books, it's all that kind of stuff. And when it comes to creativity, the greatness of it, I think, is what you guys were just talking about, which is the pushing through the mundane or the common to try to get to something that's a little bit deeper and more robust. That to me, that last 10%, 15%, 20% of the work is the hardest in some ways, but it's the most, it's what makes everything not just mediocre, but good or great, I think. And when I listen to you guys, I mean, I your guys' artwork, your guys' musicianship, all of that, and your music is Dirt Poor Robins, which, by the way, your EP came out today. I just had a chance to listen to it. It's very good.
Came out today. So there was a COVID delay with our distributor and their backlog. So it's up on Bandcamp today. Yeah.
It's up on Bandcamp today.
We'll get that resolved quickly.
Yep.
That's the first time it's ever happened.
Okay, so today's June 23. This will come out a little bit later, but today, June 23, so the day it comes out.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it might be up by.
That was the third EP in a story we're telling.
Which is
Dead Horse, Alaska.
Yeah, Dead Horse is the name of the project, and we always do concept records, so it helps us focus our energy into a specific direction. I think there's this idea in art or music or anything that if you don't have limitations or there aren't boundaries to what you're about to set out to do, that makes you have more options. And it does have more options. It also makes it harder to describe to someone else. It also makes it harder for you to explore space, because it's like there's like an infinite number of details in the universe I could go explore. But if I just start out with a room, I can get to know that room. Or if you have a specific story in which to work with, then you can explore all of the implications of that story and that conflict and the characters. So we have always done concept records as Dirt Poor Robins. Yeah,
and Dirt Poor Robins now is Dead Horse, Alaska, right? It's the thing.
Yeah.
It's three EPs, and then before that it was my microphone just fell over. It's the Ravenlocks was before that, which was an opera. Is that correct?
Yeah, musical, right? Yeah, opera. I like to say
opera. Yeah, whatever.
I like to say opera because I feel like I'm like a legit.
Sounds very smart. Yeah.
You feel like it's Phantom of the Opera.
Released over 7 years, so that was.
Yeah, that was 7 years in the making from when I started on the story before we recorded the first record and till the last one came out.
Yeah.
So,
are you guys planning on making that actually into a musical? Like, are you planning on? Is that something you guys want to do?
You got anybody at your church who's got experience with that? I mean. Again, it's just an excuse to have like a story for the record, but I mean, at the same time, it's set up. It's the whole story's there.
I would love for it to actually be a movie. I think it would be so much better on screen than on stage, but bucket list kind of.
Yeah, like 3 seasons of the Ravenlocks on Netflix, I think would be pretty.
There you go. I'd like it. Well, I think that goes to, it speaks to something deeper with you guys as artists, and which I think is, there's sometimes people can think about music as flip on the radio and I listen to whatever radio station's common and popular. And you listen to, and there's nothing, I mean, it's still music and it's still art, but this just gets to the laziness in some ways of pop music, which is, let's just play, I remember watching a YouTube video recently where somebody was, hey, I can sing any song that you tell me, playing these 4 chords, and you just tell me whatever song it is and I'll sing it, and whatever pop song. And then really you can do that with any pop tune. You just kind of go, yeah, I'll play these 4 chords there. It's always the same progression and you can sing it. That is not what you guys do. There's a depth.
Yeah,
There's
not on purpose.
No.
I mean, it's you're creating a plot line and a narrative with your melodies. And so what happens in music is that the chords and the melodies you choose imply a space or a key. Just like, like if you went to the Haunted Mansion, you were talking about that with us earlier, is there's a certain sound of music that's haunted. And then if you just hear that music, it puts you in that space. So part of what we're doing is we're trying to tell stories. So you can set up expectations, not just to satisfy those expectations, but also to subvert them or delay the satisfaction that comes with that. So you end up with, pop is really designed to be hooks, just like really short,
right.
Connected things that aren't completely satisfying, but are catchy. So you listen to it over and over again. But like if you a good symphony or you go to a good musical, you don't need it again right away. You're not going to press play on that again when you're done, because you had more of a meal than a snack.
Well, we're not. I don't think either of us are really into like esoteric stuff or dissonance or like
Jazz Odyssey.
Yeah, like I love classic. I love themes. So there is something that pop gets right in the simplicity of like a really good hook or something like that. But then if you're stuck with 4 chords, there's so many layers you can't put on there that can move people or tell the story.
So, but I think one of the things that help you understand where we come from is Kate and I have like a very similar story about what made us believe in what we do, I guess, musically, right? Like what makes us believe in like music differently than just that. What you're talking about is that shallow interaction that makes you want to move.
Yeah, it's kind of cute because we actually had kind of the same mind-blowing moment as children with the same song.
In different parts of the country.
In, very different parts of the country. But so I don't remember how old you were, like 6?
I was
or 4?
3 or 4, yeah.
He was younger than me.
Yeah.
But you're like sitting on a couch at your grandparents or something, listening to music.
Yeah, tell your side of the story.
Okay, fine. You don't want me to tell your part?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so my part was that my mom was a builder. She was actually one of the first builders here where we live in Louisville, Kentucky, first female builders. And so I was at one of her houses she was building, and it's completely empty, and there's hammering and saws and whatever. Like, I hated being in these building sites as a kid. I think I was around 8. And I heard the song come on, and I was like, what the heck is that? And I started looking through this whole empty house to find the painters in one room with their little like boom box, and it was Dust in the Wind.
Dust in the Wind by Kansas.
Yeah, and it was like I had to just stand in the room and listen to the song, because it was just doing something so different than the pop songs before it, like you're saying. And I had to listen to like every word, and I was just frozen. So
yeah, I had the same thing. I went into my grandmother's house, and they had this Victorian house with really great Victorian furniture and this painting of these Japanese junk ships on the wall at like dawn. And Dust in the Wind was coming over the hi-fi. And I just remember wandering into the room and staring at this painting. I was like, something is happening here.
Yeah.
And there was something about that song, if you listen to the words, it can kind of create an existential crisis, because it's like, I love songs like that. It's like All We Are Is Dust in the Wind. Another one of the 80s for me as a kid was John Mellencamp, or he was John Cougar back then, but was Jack and Diane. That chorus is this happy chorus where he's singing, oh yeah, life goes on long after the thrill of living is gone. So, it's really,
something's
so
not
just like it was something's crazy about that. So there was this moment where I connected with music. It was like there's like this presentation of this larger pattern of reality and life going on that music was presenting to me, that you can't just have in a normal conversation, or you haven't necessarily put together on your own. So
like making a really important point, like a life-changing point, but it's not preachy at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's just kind of seeping in there, and it's affecting you, but it's actually like changing your life in that moment.
And so I think at that moment, I was like inoculated against ever becoming a nihilist. And because nihilists see no pattern, right? Everything came about not as a purpose, right? It wasn't purpose to be here.
Haphazard.
And right. Yeah. And so, that's a really hard perspective to live under too, because all you have is the ability to distract yourself and try to conquer as much as you can while you're still alive. So, I have a totally opposite perspective, and you can sum it up in that moment in the sense that I think that hope is the opposite of nihilism. It's the idea that everything has meaning, is that hope allows you to see the world beyond. And then that's the world of meaning. And, people have called that, it's called the logos. It's like the word that describes the concept in the Bible and philosophy. So I just wanted to talk about that, man. Like whenever I made art, like there's funny versions of that and goofy versions of that, but there's also like real, like deep versions that hit me when I'm making music. So I want to participate in that hope that sees what's really going on and what things really mean, dark or light, behind the scenes, those patterns.
Before I was a Christian, even there was I was really drawn to like just impacting people. Like, I don't want to say messing with their emotions, but like, actually like drawing emotion out of people with music. And so I was doing that as a kid, and just like, people would bawl and whatever, but I didn't
trying
really
to make
have,
her mom's friends cry.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't have like that deeper meaning of like, well, what do you do it for? What are you moving them toward? So then when Jesus came into the picture, now it's kind of like, oh, okay, you can actually use that to for something important. Not just kind of messing with people's heartstrings,
Sure. Yeah, you can hone that in, and it gives you a little bit of a bullseye to try to hit, or at least to aim at as you're thinking through some of those things specifically. I think one of the things that I love about you guys and Dirt Poor Robins is what you guys are talking about with overarching themes, with overarching stories. It's nothing's really trite, or at least if it is trite, it's purposefully trite for a reason, to make a larger point. I'm assuming you do that on purpose, as you're dealing with these things. What do you hope that people are getting out of it? Like, as you think about you're making music, what do you, as someone listens to an album, someone listens to a song, what are you guys going for, Kate, what you were just talking about, which we want emotion, we want people to be emotionally pulled to it, to find the picture, to see what's happening. What's the deeper thing you guys are going for in your music?
Yeah, she's looking at me. I can feel the eyes.
I know what I would say.
Feel the eyes.
Well, it's hard to say, because I can tell you why. Like, I do an analysis of why I like the things I like and why I'm drawn towards things I'm drawn towards. But when it comes to making music, it feels more intuitive than that. It feels like, well, they're like a story will come to my head, or a song, and I'll push things around until they fit together. Because the word art, it's etymology. It just means things well fit together. And so people take structures and story in music for granted, as if they were just imposed on us. But, there's a reason that there's always a parent dead in the old Disney stories. And it has everything to do with what's going to be the challenge. Like in The Little Mermaid, like having your mother dead means that there's going to be a quest to discover her nature. And she doesn't know if she wants to be a mermaid. She might want to be a human, and all of the, what it means to try to come to terms with what you've been separated from. And, and so even in the Christian story, you have this sense of, well, there was a paradise we're built for. It's like why we're squishier than the other animals. Like, you could say it that way. It's like, we're not really meant for all this, it's like, oh, I came from a gorilla. That guy can run through a briar patch and tear the jaw of a cheetah. And why couldn't I have kept some of that? So I'm not sure about some of those things, but the idea that we're separated from, in a way, like a mother, like where our nature belongs. And part of the story that's unfolding in front of us is an understanding of our nature. And so those structures where people kind of mock them in stories, or they mock the fact that it's as you're a young boy, you're totally fascinated by princess stories, because it's not about young women. I mean, there's a young woman character, but it's about how you develop a conscience, right? And what those things represent, and how you learn to, overcome the illusory views of a child that aren't going to help you survive in the world, into something that helps you survive, but not just survive for your own benefit, for the benefit of others around you. So those kind of structures are what fascinates me, and I try to participate with them intuitively, because if I try to think them out too much, I end up just rehashing things I've already heard. But sometimes you might intuit something, that you never would have thought of otherwise. And then you break it down 3 years later and you're like, oh, this is what that meant. So that's, we're kind of, the question kind of refers to talking about how do you aim things. And I don't know how to aim.
Well, recently, especially like with my actual sketching, like my visual sketching, some of it's been a little controversial. Like I've been asked questions about it, like what's my goal or what am I trying to get across? And it's really not as much about like, I want people to think like I do, like you were saying earlier when we were chatting. It's more about, I want people to think, I just want people to, and maybe like a little bit more emphasis on critical thinking, like actually looking for patterns and digging and not just believing what you're fed on the surface. So I think in everything, it's not that we're trying to, get everybody on the same page with us, but more just a call to actually open their eyes and see the patterns and see what's happening around them.
Yeah.
That would be my goal, probably.
That's really good. Well, that's the best art does that. I mean, I think that as I think about the best art in my life, whether that's a painting I go see or something, it always evokes something that makes you go, it's why the Mona Lisa is so popular, because you look at it and you go, is she smiling? I don't know. Like, what's she smiling about?
Yeah.
Who, what's happening? And it makes you ask questions of the artwork itself or the painter or the musician, which I think is great. Like that's what, if it's true that creativity is, and I'm getting ahead of myself, we don't have to go down here, but if creativity is an attribute of God that he's passed on to us as image bearers, man, there's a depth to it that I think we'll never fully explore and get to the bottom of. But man, if there's something good about pushing our brains and asking questions of things like that.
Yeah, I think that like really one of the things when you're talking about that type of role for an artist, it's we have a tendency to turn things into small labels that mean less than the real thing is. We don't account for the anomalies within those categories or those groups, right? Obviously, like, not all people of a certain group, even the label Christian, think even close to the same necessarily. So an artist is always, I guess, trying to make things three-dimensional. It's not like, hey, this is a water bottle, but an artist is also like, that's a water bottle. You wouldn't draw it that way though, would you? So, because that's what we do, just in the efforts to make life efficient and know what to focus on and what to focus out. We try to like make everything really clear and have a real clear view. But at the same time, we've got to account for these other things that are coming into the mix. I mean, it's a really weird story, but I mean, I think I talked to you about this on the phone the other day. There's a Flannery O'Connor story where she, like, as a little kid, goes to a carnival and sneaks in, and like there's a hermaphrodite there, like, half guy, half girl. And as the crowd's like astonished by him, he's saying, hey, I'm just as God made me, right? And it's a really, really weird story, because in the story she falls asleep and she's remembering this, and it starts to turn into a church service, like that testifies to God. And so there's part of us that wants to like push away all the things that don't fit, and we forget that like we wouldn't understand our vision or how our vision works if there weren't blind people. Like there's always some sort of like opposite thing that we don't want for ourselves that actually needs to exist for us to understand everything. And so that, I mean, it could be an esoteric point for people, but I think that there's that side of, Christianity where people lose a lot of our great symbolism. So Moses, the people get struck by these serpents in the desert, right? And then he holds up a serpent on a staff. And Jesus refers to Nicodemus like that he's that serpent on the staff. And if you went and put a serpent on a staff at your church, people would be like, what's this demonic symbol?
Right, for sure.
And then, but if you look at the old crucifixes, like he's there in a serpentine pattern to allude to that pattern. And so what's happened is, I think that Christianity, in a sense, trying to be consistent and trying to be pure, has eliminated anything that could be ever taken confusing or wrong or used as a negative symbol also, and basically handed off all of the mysticism and all the mystery of Christianity to the occult. The occult basically came along and stole all of those Christian symbols.
All the good stuff.
All the good stuff. Even a pentagram like used to be used to represent the 5 wounds of Christ. And then as soon as, Satanism co-opted it, or, it was like, it's gone.
Right.
So there's lots of things like that, and that, you know, I think we've got a really narrow tradition because it's just for the sake of consistency. It keeps cutting off anything that could be misunderstood or mysterious.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, it's good.
Well, just one of the things I've always enjoyed doing, even before I met Neil, but especially in the last couple projects, is like I always wanted to tell the villain story or tell the story of somebody that people were looking down on or judging. And I wanted to put myself in that person's shoes and tell their story. And I really didn't even know why as a teenager. And I would even like, people would come to my mom and be like, man, she's had a rough life, huh? Like, no, she didn't.
No, it's
she didn't
good.
know
It's
any of those
just,
things. Just a story. But as a believer now, it's like it becomes so much more important because you can paint a picture of a story and then say, but we're no better than them. Like we need saving just like they need saving. So it took on a layer, you know, as a believer to still, you know, bring these fringe kind of concepts to the front.
that's good.
Tell that story. Yeah.
That's yeah. So like Maleficent, the movie, is that same thing where it's like, hey, here's the villain, but let's look at it from her perspective. What is actually going on? It's one of the better Disney. Honestly, it's one of the better Disney adaptations I've seen because I'm like, man, this is incredible. Like to take a different perspective on the villain and go, is she a villain? Maybe she's not a villain. Maybe
it's a
she's
great
got
question.
The villain is always the hero of their own story. Right?
It's true.
It's a good question for all of us to ask ourselves, you know, any
for sure.
day. Like, am I the villain in my story?
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a purpose. There's a purpose in inverting stories and telling it from other angles, although everything can't be that, obviously, because then you don't have the basic structure. But every once in a while, it's fun to flip it and look at it. I mean, you do see a cultural problem right now is that I think that feminine symbolism and masculine symbolism is just totally lost. They think that we can just switch the roles of the characters and we're telling the same story. And I don't think that's helpful because, you know, I mean, again, if you look at the metaphysical structure of Christianity and the way the Bible begins to talk about the heavens and the earth, and it makes these opposites, land and sea and day and night, and it eventually makes man and woman. Where objective beauty comes from in the world is where these opposites meet. So, you know, if you meet land and sea, that's the beach and that's beautiful. And almost everybody thinks so. And not many people are like grossed out by the sight of waves crashing on the sand, or the top of a mountain where the heavens meet the earth. I mean, people get there and we have a similar phenomenological experience, and same with sunrises and sunsets. People generally don't hate those. It's more of an objective beauty. Like
I hate that beauty. There's too many colors over there on the horizon. I just can't stand.
Sunset, I don't like it.
It's confusing for us as a culture now because, especially with some technological revolutions of like birth control and other things and like indoor plumbing, like men and women are mostly the same. Like, I mean, Kate, how many fingers do you have? Like, you have 10. Okay, we both have arms. We're mostly the same, but there are, you know, generally we define things by what's the difference, right?
Very
so,
it's very different than me.
The inner workings of a woman are far more mysterious. When I say phenomenologically, I mean just based on my, you know, empirical senses, my sight and whatever. And men are much easier to figure out like the differences. It's like all on the outside, and women is all on the inside, and you know, like children are knit together in a mysterious place. And so I think that some parts of Christian art has become so masculinized, and I don't mean that in like it's got a beard. I mean that people are trying so hard to be so clear about what they're saying that they miss that there has to be something outside. There has to be negative space in a picture. There has to be, because sometimes questions are more interesting than answers, and the question
for sure
is what makes you pursue the thing. So
well, I grew up thinking that God works in mysterious ways was actually in the Bible.
God moves in mysterious ways. Well, I think that's where a lot of you know, we can even in our reading of the Bible or understanding of theology, we can have we can try to dismiss the gray in some things because we feel like it's too difficult to grasp mentally when it's not black and white. But the thing is there's so much gray. Not on main when we talk about the gospel and the resurrection and Jesus dying for sins and things like that. but there's so much gray as we try and live this life, that we're trying to walk it out and live it in a way that's going to honor the Lord and please him. And we walk through that. It is possible for us to land on different spots, because there is some gray that we're just trying to get. Chances are we're going to get to heaven, and all of us, we're going to be like, I tried really hard. I thought that was what you, I thought I was right on that. Wasn't.
I was wrong on that one.
Yeah, we're all going to have moments of that, just because we're trying to make sense of God we can't understand him. And I think art does, in some ways it does what what you're talking about, which is it does lend itself to similar grace, and it should, because we should have some of those feelings of, there's a mystery here.
That's part of the language. That's part of the language loss we've had in the Bible, and it's really helpful for artists to recapture it, because what do you think you can say is well, God's unseen, his essence we don't know, but his energy we do see, right? And especially if you learn to look at the world that way, you can take the wind, and wind is the same word for spirit. You don't see the wind, but you see what it moves, right? So the wind, we know it's there, and if you can, why the leaves are flipping and why the flag is blowing, what the wind is. And so I think a lot of that's been lost. I think a lot of it's been lost because of science and Christians' tendency to want to defend themselves in this materialistic, realistic, scientific sense, where it's well-intentioned, but Lee Strobel has this book, The Case for Christ, and I've read it, and I thought it was fascinating. But, by the time you get to The Case for Christ, it's Christ, why does water and blood come out of his side? It's a question that people would ask. Why is it water and blood? That's not a normal thing. And Lee Strobel will go around and interview doctors and people, and they're like, oh, that's because he was dehydrated on the cross, and there was evidence that he was actually dead. And you're like, oh, that's an interesting answer, but not nearly as good as how it works within the Bible's typological structure, meaning that there's this sign has been interpreted for us so many other times in the Bible. And so it's okay, well, you can look at it this way, where water and blood is always a birth sign, right? So water first, blood second, life second. And that the same thing happens when Jesus is at the Feast of Cana. His mother opens the door, mothers open our door into this world, and she's opening the door into death there for him. And he's saying, this is not my time. And he goes and takes the water and turns it into wine. It's a birth sign. And also it's you go back and you're oh, it comes out of his side. And then you have, where does Eve come from? From Adam, right? Where does his bride come from? And so you could look at that sign and be well, when we see the water and the blood, we're watching Christ give birth to the church, his own bride, if you want to look at the real complexity of that idea. And that's far more helpful for me to know
than he was
that he died for this to rescue a bride. It's there's this and so that's so much more helpful to know than examining a dead corpse kind of way of looking at the Bible historically. Because it doesn't matter that he rose again if you don't see what he said is true. Right. So
right. Which is why I think when you're reading, the Bible's a good example. There's so many things that allude to other things. There's so many, Jesus is speaking in parables, because he's telling a lot of patterns, lots of stories. He's trying to understand these things, which I think artwork, some of the best artwork, again, it brings about some of those questions, or you're trying to understand it. You guys actually do that, I think, really well in terms of your songwriting. I actually wanted to chat real quick about this in terms of imagery and metaphor. Anyways, is a good bridge, because you guys have intentionally written in such a way. We just talked about it, where you're writing in musical form. It's three acts. You're trying to get something across. Imagery and metaphor, I'm assuming for you guys, really matters. One of these lyrics, sure. I think I'd just love for you to just even chat about this kind of thing, like an example in I Shot a Man, which, by the way, when I listen to that, it's just, I'm oh, this is the Old West, right? You're this is the gunslinger, man. Here we go. And it's haunting in a really good way. It's very, very subdued, but Kate, your voice is amazing in it. It's great.
Thank
you
you.
Sing it really well. But the last phrases are, I shot a man because I knew my darkest depths he peered into. He saw into his heart of sin. He saw inside and still climbed in. He looked at me and I could see the cost of immortality. I shot him through the feet and hands. My God, oh God, I shot a man. Now, clearly at that point, there's a turn. It's a, oh, wait, okay, wait, what are we talking about now? Because what's
Right.
happened? Like, okay, it flips and it causes you what you guys are just saying to go, wait, okay, this is deeper than just what we were talking about. Uses of metaphor and imagery matter in music. And you guys do that really well. Give me some thoughts. What part does imagery and metaphor play for you guys as you're writing songs, as you're thinking about music and art?
We'll just talk about that.
Well, do you want me to speak to that song specifically at all? Or
sure. Speak to that
just in
song
general?
specifically. Speak to the song specifically, and then generally.
Neil will go much more profound on that subject than I will, I would imagine. But
The pressure's on.
that song specifically I wrote, and we had moved out into the country, into, you know, a big old country house that had a past. It had some creepy, you know, people were killed here, and I'm not superstitious.
Which is, by the way, which is fantastic, because you have the book. They wrote a book on it, and you guys have the book on your bookshelf, and you're like, well, this is.
Yeah, like we put it like in the guest room, like in case you want to read. The first chapter like talks about our house. So, but so we weren't superstitious, but then he had gone to Nashville to record, and I'm home with children, and I'm thinking about like holding down the homestead. Like, could I protect us if somebody broke in or something? And I'm going down these country roads driving, and all of a sudden I'm just like, I shot a man, I heard him. Like, I just started singing it. And I was thinking about like, could I actually take someone's life? So that was where the thought started. And it kind of fleshes that out in the first verse of like, I did it. I killed someone. And this is what I saw. And this is what it looked like. And then I kind of just kept following that thought through of like, well, what would that actually do to your life? How would that change who you are to do something like that? And so then second verse, we get into the metaphor of like what red represents in history, and
it's a history full of murder.
It can be love, but it can also be murder and hate and justice and all these different things. So we follow it there, and I think I got to that point, and I want to say it was your idea.
You were on the last verse. She didn't realize the punchline she had set up, and I hate to say punchline because it sounds like a joke, but I mean,
I know what you mean.
Punchlines that are also like a twist in a film, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we brought it. We realized again, like I was saying earlier, to bring it down to like we're all guilty,
culpable.
Like, we're all culpable. And
culpable.
So it was like, so little plug
podcast
there.
Culpable. Listen to it. It's good. Music. Dirt Poor Robin's right.
That's right. So, to bring it around to like, we all put Christ on the cross, or, you know, that we're all guilty. So to bring it around to that bigger story, but you kind of draw someone in with the mood and the tone and the haunted kind of feel. And then you make a point to just chew on for a little while.
Yeah. You flip it.
And you flip it.
And that's good. I mean, but that's it in general. Like for us, I mean, it's kind of a dead language. Some people call it typology. Some people call it structural symbolism. It's the same language of the parables, though, is that you look, and it's a language everybody understands. They just don't know it at first. So like for a while before I understood structural symbolism and how it works, like in the Bible, like I thought Jesus was just being intentionally cryptic, and he's not. He knows how to talk about every level of existence at the same exact time. So when he teaches, so I'll give you an example, like the Bible has these categories like the heavens and the earth, and then it has like laws and the civilization itself, or the structures. Like it has it has your mind and your body. These are all microcosms of the same thing. So, you know, if you ever pick up a leaf on a tree, you might notice that it has the same shape of a tree on it. It's got a little stem, and like maybe not in Arizona, you guys got like cacti. Cactuses.
We have a lot of cacti here.
On it, and then the branch, if you pull it out, it looks like a tree in the ground, and then you have the tree itself. Like a tree, yep. And so there's all this type of macrocosm structure to the Bible. So when he says, you know, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, there's something weird about that when you hear it at first, because you're like, they have to do his will in heaven isn't like automatically obvious. Like, what are we talking about? And it's like, he's talking about you. He's talking about your mind. It's like, let the right ideas fill your mind, and may they be acted out in your body. So Kate just left, so I'll fill the screen. Sorry, we have children here.
Sorry. That's okay.
So anyway, so this is like a thing when the parable of the seed and the sower is true about everything. It's true about everything in the sense that you not just like what he's calling the good news in the story, right? Or the kingdom of God. It's also about like, if I say, hey, where should we go for lunch right now? And somebody in the room might be like, it's like not good soil for that idea. Or it might be about something bigger. It might be about these, a law in society, or how something should be structured, or how it's even good for us to live on the earth. All of these things follow that same pattern, why good ideas fail and why good ideas succeed. So he's constantly talking about every level of the universe at the same time. And even with like the whole, those who have been given little, like even that'll be taken away, and those who have been given much, the more will be given. That's true of everything in the universe. That's planets. That's black holes. That's however far out you go or however small you go, it's true. So when I started to see that, and there's this, like, we kind of lost it in over the years, in the last 200 years, this sort of symbolic languages in the Bible too. And I don't mean it that it's not literal. Like, I mean, it's also literal, right?
But it points to things. It points to things that are going to happen. It points to things that happened in the past.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And it's why the stories that do it right, it's why those stories last forever. I mean, you had mentioned something about another band I was in. We did a song that had to do with the Karate Kid. And if you just look at the structure of the Karate Kid, it tells you so much about everything. It's actually it's actually a structure of the Old Testament, in the sense where how Mr. Miyagi is having him do these things. Like he's acting out these rituals, and he doesn't understand that he's inadvertently learning the micro routines of blocking and, different types of attack. He has no clue. And then there's a part of that you have to see in the Bible where you see that same structure of people who are going through rituals and maybe don't understand all the reasons why, but they're rehearsing, like with the Passover, they're rehearsing what's actually going to come, that Jesus unlocks at the Last Supper. Yeah. And so these structures are so helpful. There's some really great books about it out there right now. And it's something that people are reawakening to. And it's so helpful if you want to be creative within the realm of Christianity, to get outside of just this forensic analysis of the details, where you have definitions of things, but you don't really have meaning, because the meaning is in the story and the narrative and how that hits you.
Give me the title of one of the books you like.
Really, one of the it's a little headier of a read, but James Jordan has a book called Through New Eyes, and he's probably one of the best experts on this. There's another book. It's really great. The guy who wrote it is really an incredibly wise person. His name is Alistair Roberts, and the book is called Echoes in Exodus, or Echoes of Exodus.
That book is That book is so good.
Yeah,
I read that book.
Stuff, especially.
Oh man, Echoes of Exodus. Yeah, it's Alistair Roberts and Andrew Wilson, I think. That book is fantastic. Man, I love.
They're great dudes too. I mean, I feel like they know everything when I talk to them. But so there's.
I just love that you talk to them.
I'll throw you a curveball.
I know, right?
Yeah, right.
I call it Neil's Boy Club.
The last one's by another Mathieu Peugeot. He's French Canadian. Mathieu Peugeot, and it's called The Language of Creation. Okay. And that he breaks down the symbolism used in Genesis and how it applies across, how it's an introduction to how those symbols function throughout the Bible. Cool. So every time, you talk about earth and heavens, like the word heavens, people mistake that to mean heaven, like the heaven of heaven all the time. And it's not. It's like about the things that are in the sky. It's
the heavens. Yeah.
Right.
The actual literal account of the heavens. You guys, that's all really helpful. Those book recommendations are good. You guys are Christians, obviously, right. playing music, and there's a weird, you just mentioned No More Kings, which, by the way, if you listen to this, you haven't heard No More Kings, you go listen to it.
That's your fun time music.
Yeah,
that's the fun time music.
Yeah, we haven't done anything in a long time, but that was
but that's the Karate Kid, Sweep the Leg, which, by the way, I credit you with the reboot of the Karate Kid, Cobra Kai. I really feel like that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you guys bringing them all together. Yeah, exactly. But No More Kings and now Dirt Poor Robins. Music. I don't know about you guys. I think we're roughly the same age. I think we grew up with the same Christian bands that we're listening to, and I was always growing up like,
probably not.
Either if you're a Christian, you're in a Christian band. If you're not a Christian, if you're Amy Grant, you're a Christian. But when she decided to go, hey, I just want to do some mainstream music, it was almost like she's apostate. Like, oh my gosh, Amy Grant.
Right.
and Michael W. Smith, he did a secular album. Like, what in the world? He's gone off the, like that was the era that I grew up in. Go West, young man, and then to like whatever was happening, which is I think a false dichotomy, because all music is God-given. It's a language that God made, and harmonies and melodies and all these things played together. Because that's how God made it. One of the things I love about reading like C.S. Lewis in The Magician's Nephew is the creation in that account happened through music, which I just think is a brilliant way to think about it. Creative, right? And Kate, as you were talking a second ago, as you're thinking about I Shot a Man, it started with something that most people might go, why would you ever think about that? It's a can I actually kill somebody? But it's there's a creative part to that.
You weirdos to the cross.
Well, just like it just creativity. Some people are going to listen to this and go, my brain does not work like that. And I'd say, yeah, that's okay, because we're all different and God made us different. So like even a C.S. Lewis, who's thinking about creation through song, I think is a really intuitive way to think through that. So faith and music go together, whether we're singing about Jesus inherently or whether it's metaphoric, whether we have things. I would just love I know you have thoughts on this. So in the limited time we have left, your thoughts on just faith and music, how you guys think about those things, how you guys put that together in your own brains.
Let me kick you off, because he said something I think was really important, and I think it'll set you up too. Is that you there's a dichotomy. There's a mischaracterization by labeling something a Christian band or just a normal band. I think that doesn't make sense to me. There are Christian lyrics, right? That idea makes sense. I think it's more helpful to think of like there's music meant for Christian services, right? And then there's music. Because otherwise you end up having a genre that's not a real genre. It's a lyric-based genre. It's like I sing songs about the Sham Wow or something. So I don't like, it's like
the Sham Wow. I love you just referenced the Sham Wow.
You know what I mean? Like I was like,
I know what you mean.
That's what it, as ridiculous as it feels like to me, that genre is like, we have like, and who's patrolling that genre to make sure that your lyrics are within orthodoxy? Right. It's like it's a really weird category. So we don't even think in those categories.
No, and I would piggyback onto that, and this might be a little controversial, but it gets under my skin, the idea of like safe for the whole family. Just the idea, like there's whole radio stations built around this, but like, don't worry, your kids will never hear anything inappropriate. Well, now one side of that obviously is
we
great.
saw that, so people have some anchor in that. We would tour the country. This started showing up in the mid 2000s, like around 2005, 2006, where we would see billboards as we pull into a city for the Christian radio station, and their advertisement was safe for little ears.
Right.
Safe for little ears. Like, that's not what Christianity is. It's pretty bloody.
Safe. Christianity isn't safe. I mean,
a lot of martyrs.
It's a little like you have nurseries in churches that have like a cute boat with happy animals on it. And it's like, that is not that story. That's a pretty intense story. So I think we both, even with our own children, like we're trying to raise them in a real world, that is not just a little bubble that protects them. Like God doesn't seem like a God that just puts us in a bubble. And so first of all, I think that's one of the things that has set us apart is we've always been a little unsafe for the family, maybe, but we're trying to tell the truth. And we had a moment in time where we were kind of trying to decide whether to release a Christian record or a secular record.
We were getting a lot of offers from Christian record labels. Right.
But we were told pretty emphatically that the music was that was their word, not mine, too sophisticated for Christian music stations. So they wouldn't play it.
Try to get us to dumb it down.
They wouldn't play it, and it wasn't as we've used a word already, but it wasn't as black and white as Christian music needed to be. We didn't spell it out enough. Or we didn't say Jesus enough in our songs or whatever. And when we left, we had been in full-time ministry, and we left to do music full-time. And we had some people kind of say, hey, I liked you better when you were Christians. And we were like, well, we're
literally singing the same songs.
We're singing the exact same songs that we sang in church.
You are Michael W. Smith. You lived the Michael W. Smith experience.
Yeah. So, I get it. If it's at a church service, then it serves a very specific purpose. But outside of that, like Les Mis is one of the most beautiful redemption stories that you can read, and Jesus is never called by name necessarily, but So yeah, I mean, I think we're meant to create, and there's a lot of different ways to do that doesn't have to be totally spelled out.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a pretentious time where people have an us against them mentality in general, and so labels really fail us because they've been so much baggage has been attached to any label you could say you are, even a type of music. Generally, if I say a type of music and you don't like it, you'll define it by all the songs you don't like in that thing. Or if I just say something like, oh, he's got a type A personality, like 90% of the people might have like, think of the worst type A personality,
right,
CEO type, as opposed to the one guy who's awesome. You know, because we have a tendency to do that. Oh,
I know. I'm sorry, I got excited. I will say that our fans have been really gracious because we have fans from every different belief system and
primarily not Christian
or atheist or whatever. But they're gracious with our belief system because it's not like poured on heavy, you know, like we're telling good stories. And one of my favorite insults we ever got was a guy that said we were sheep in wolves' clothing.
Is that he got so mad when he found out that we were Christians in real life.
I thought that was
that's amazing, actually.
Yeah.
A sheep in wolf's clothing. Okay.
Yeah.
So it really made him mad.
That's actually funny. That's actually pretty funny.
Yeah,
well
I mean,
done.
there's a lot to unpack in this category. I feel like I could talk about this all day long. But, you know, within Christianity itself, there's a real explicit path where your faith is supposed to point, right? But at the same time, within that same structure, the Bible allows for the idea that, like, the logos is in everything, right? Even in bad behavior, if you pay attention and come to your senses and you actually look at what's happening, it's testifying to the truth, because you should be able to experience the hollowness in your actions, right? So there's I don't categorically like put things in this world where I'm thinking this idea is Christian and this idea is not Christian. I'm thinking this idea is true. Right. Now, what do you do with the truth? That's Christian, right? Like, that's Christian. But like, truth in general is like, there's so many stories that are true. There's so many stories that are inadvertently Christian that are classic stories where it's not even explicitly Christian in any capacity. And people do this with Lord of the Rings. That's why Christians love Lord of the Rings. And so
we want to move to New Zealand.
I think one of the things, here's what really helps me.
Absolutely.
I think the idea of, you know, there's that really abstract idea that comes up in Genesis when it first appears. Adam is told, and Adam and Eve, male and female alike, are told they're made in the image of God. It's like, okay, that's pretty esoteric. That's a pretty high idea. We're going to believe it because it came out of God's mouth, but there's really not a lot to compare to at that time to understand what that means. It's like, what do I look around at the other animals, try to figure out the difference, and then that's what the image of God is? It's like, we don't really know what to do with that if you just have that. But as you start to go along, so let's just call that, like, when we're talking about macro structures and micro structures, let's call that the tree itself. That's the tree. So that's like, there's all these kind of trees, which are all these ideas that are introduced in a really broad stroke way that get fleshed out through the rest of the book. So, you know, another branch on that tree that might come along is love your neighbor as yourself. That's what it means to be, you're made in God's image. She's made in God's image. That means that I need to treat her the way I think is right for me to be treated. Yeah. Okay. So you get a little bit stronger of a detailed structure. And then finally, you know, as you get to the end, you start to get to these like parables Christ is teaching and examples he has. You know, one of the ones that's, I think, a real challenging one, and I love it. I'll call this a leaf on the tree that has the same exact pattern of made in the image of God, is the sheep and the goats. And at the end of the sheep and goats, we come away with the idea that that we've done to the least, we've done to Christ. So like the people we've dismissed, the people we hate, or we think we hate, or we've ignored, that's Christ too. And so you could say, what does it mean to be made in the image of God? And you connect it to this idea. Well, it means that I only love God as much as the person I love the least. Right? You connected that with Kate's face getting blocked. So it's helpful. Let me know. So what is that? How does that impact me as an artist? What does that mean as an artist? Well, it means to me as an artist, I don't think the world is full of stupid people. Like social media is like one of the saddest things I'll see, because everybody's got who's ever not in their group, and Christians will do this, and you know, whatever category you are, if you're liberal or conservative, they just think it's just the world's full of stupid people. And I'm like, that's the worst idea that's not going to help you ever get to the bottom of what it means to live in a world where we treat other people like they're the image of God. And then it leads to really bad ideas like the world's overpopulated, as opposed to what I see as I'm like, God really likes people. Like, wow, like he's really into people. And so, and those lead to all kinds of bad ideas and ways to turn other people into the enemy. And I think one of the most profound things, I think the most artistic statement ever made, meaning that the person who has all the perspective and has all the right to cling to his divinity, when the worst things ever are happening to him, he says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And it's like, that's art. Like the ability to see that in that moment, that is art. That's what I want art to be. And so, and I don't have to necessarily, not everything I do has to be trying to show that idea. But again, like there's all kinds of leaves on this tree that make the whole tree. And I want to explore those in a way that's true. Right. In a way that's true. So
I want some leaves on that tree.
Yeah. So that's the implication.
That's good.
Like when I think about, as someone who's made in the image of God, how does that affect art? Right. I would say that's it. It's like, it gives me a totally different perspective of people than I would have in a natural sense, where I'd see people that help me as good and people that don't as bad.
That's great.
We do.
That's helpful.
Our art is for others. Like I would say that for sure. If there was no one to hear what I do or see what I do, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, we're trying to make the soundtrack for their lives.
Yeah.
We're trying to make the soundtrack for their lives.
And I think which is awesome. I think that, because I think as we think about human experience, humanity, Christian life, art in of itself is sometimes an overlooked or a secondary category, just as we live, let's just say, the Christian life. You know, art can kind of be there are some people that are artists, but I think it's such an important way that we view, through which we can view the world, whether that's any type of artwork, whether that's going to I remember we were in Paris a few years ago, and we went to the Monet exhibit, and my kids were just like so bored. I'm just trying to figure out, this is Monet, you have to understand. And it wasn't until a couple of years, like last year, my oldest daughter, we were like giving her a hard time for, remember when you guys didn't even want to see the Monets? And she was like, well, why do I want to see somebody's paintings of like copies of Monet? And I was like, no, that wasn't a copy of Monet. Monet actually painted those paintings. And she was like, it dawned on her, I was like, oh no, like you missed it. Like you missed the whole story. But I think that we as Christians, above everybody else, should love and cherish and enjoy art. Yeah. Of all kinds. Great writing, great music, great paintings, great drawings, because there's something about it that helps us understand the creativity of God, who had a blank canvas, and he made worlds and people and animals and colors,
right,
and things that fly,
creator,
right.
For sure.
But
the creator.
In my style, I'll say the counterpoint to that, because I think everything you're saying is really helpful for people to know, especially people who've just dismissed that thing too lightly, right? Yeah. Is that not all art's good? Not all art's helpful. Right. Not all art has a way to participate in it that's actually the best idea for your soul. Right. And so you have to put that into the mix, because one of the things, like the fact that we, like in Christianity, that like the creator of all things like incarnates, the Son of God, he comes down in flesh, right? Is that it gives us the interpretive structure for the world. Like if you look at the world through the incarnation, you don't just try to look at this event that seems like foolishness to the Greeks, like it says in the Bible, because they're just trying to analyze why any of this makes sense. It's like, if you look at the world through it, and you can start to see that everything in the world is like, there are bad ideas or things that are wrong, that need to die and be born again as something that is good. Like that's how any change you've made, everything in the world works like that. Everything dies and resurrects all the time. And so when you start to see this like core thing at the center of it as the interpretive structure for the world, and what it points to, what that structure is of that hope of the life to come, right? as we look to the resurrection of the dead one day, like that idea that comes up in Christianity, is that some art is just too abstract, because it's like there's a general sense of hope, but there's no interpretive structure to understand what that hope might be. And so I think good art is art that it might challenge a wrong position you have. It might confirm a good position you have, but there's a way to understand it and participate in it. If it doesn't have that sort of incarnation in it, it's not the logos. It's something that pulls you away from it too. Yeah. So there is bad art and there is good art, but I would always encourage people to be surprised. Like, there's a reason there's gargoyles on Notre Dame, and they actually have meaning within Christian structure. There's a reason that Jesus is represented as a serpent. Like, it's not everything is always bad. Like, that actually, like, the angels are the same and demons are the same thing. The demons they've lost their remembrance of who God is and what they were made for. And so that's one of the things we forget, I think, too often, is that we just think there's like this real narrow set of things that are good, and they're Thomas Kincaid paintings, and they're Mickey Mouse ears, and they're,
safe for the family.
and it's beds of flowers and sunrises and sunsets. Yeah. But there's all kinds of things in their right place at the right time, as Solomon is kind to point out. There's something to be learned from all of it.
Well, the other thing I want to just end on for myself is that I think
just for herself, everybody can shut off now.
I'm gonna be done after this. No, it's just that besides engaging and enjoying art, I think that there should be a call for more people to actually create art. And I think part of the problem maybe is this like over professionalizing of gifts. Kind of like, oh, well, if they're a good singer, they're a professional singer. Or if they work on dance, they're a professional dancer. And I think that we were made by God to be singers and to be dancers and to be crafters, whether that's with paint or sculpting, or I think we were meant to be creative. And I don't think that should just be left to like, the 2%
the professionals
that can get paid. So I would encourage everyone out there to do more of that, because it is an echo of this greater creator. And that's when I feel the closest to God, is when I'm making something,
but we're all called to sing, but we're not all called to hold a microphone and sing.
That's true. That's a good way to say it. That's a good way to say it. I feel like we could, I could pick your guys' brains on these things for a long time. But we'll
have to back next time and make another record.
We'll do it. Tell us real quick. Give me a 1 minute. Where can people find you in terms of just following you guys on social media or listening to your music, getting your EP?
Right. Yeah. Well, Dirt Poor Robins with one B, like the bird, like Dirt Poor Robins. You can put that in Google and you'll find us. You can put it on YouTube, and the song
We're on Instagram.
The song Great Vacation will come up because that has like a bazillion views. But we have a website of the same name. It's not, we put no care into the website. It's just links into all the other places you can find our stuff. If you like bands, like I grew up on the bands like Queen and Pink Floyd and stuff like that. If you like bands that have more of an epic, cinematic, theatrical sound, really trying to paint a picture with a female vocal. There's a little bit of a carnival aesthetic to us, like we're a little bit fringy. If those things you like, if you like the movie Moulin Rouge, you'll probably like us. Like
listed all things Christians don't listen or watch.
No, that you're wrong. But yes, find us, Dirt Poor Robins, and just start let's just see what your search engine shows you from that.
Yeah. We're on YouTube, we're on iTunes, we're on Bandcamp, Spotify.
Yeah, generally by the time you get to the DIRT space P, Google will fill in the rest for you.
Cool. Okay, good. Well, I love talking to you guys about this stuff. It's great to just hang with you guys again. So thanks for jumping on
having
with
us. This was great.
Yeah, great to have you guys.
Go team.
Thanks for joining us today. Grateful for you listening. Looking forward to next time. See ya.